Now available in paperback and e-readers. John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Four people were killed and 9 others were wounded when a 14-year-old participated in a mass shooting at a Georgia high school.
Well, good morning. I'm Anne Marie Green, and this morning, another American community is reeling from deadly gun violence after a horrific mass shooting at a Georgia high school. Investigators say a student opened fire at Apalachee High School in Widener, Georgia. Yesterday morning, 4 people were killed. 9 others were injured. Officers confronted the 14-year-old suspect at the scene and took him into custody, and they say that he was armed with an AR-style weapon. The victims were identified as 2 14-year-old students and 2 teachers. Police identified the alleged shooter as Colt Gray, who they say will be charged with murder and tried as an adult. The high school is located roughly 45 miles northeast of Atlanta, and that is where we find CBS News' Dave Malkoff, who is following the very latest on this tragic situation. Dave, good morning.
It really is, Anne Marie, and it is now the worst case of school violence in Georgia state history. When parents tried to get here, it was very difficult. It was traffic time of the day, but also the streets were blocked off because of this police activity. They didn't care about that. They abandoned their cars by the side of the road, left the doors swinging, and just came running, in some cases, 2.5 miles to get right here, to get to their kids.
Begin to change.
A community is in mourning after another unspeakable American tragedy. Yesterday, just before 10:30 a.m., police say a 14-year-old student carrying an AR-style rifle opened fire at Apalachee High School, located just about an hour outside of Atlanta.
The gunshots were so close to me, like my ears started ringing real bad. Like the whole classroom was smoking. I saw one of my classmates on the ground, bleeding so bad.
Students and teachers barricaded themselves in classrooms.
You can hear gunshots like just ringing out through the school, and like you're just wondering like which one of those is going to be somebody that you're like best friends with or somebody that you love.
The suspected shooter, identified as Colt Gray, was taken into custody alive. Later, roughly 1,900 students were escorted out of the school and onto the football field where they reunited with their families. The FBI says the suspect and his father were both questioned by Jackson County Sheriff's officials last year after they received anonymous online tips about a school shooting threat. But at that point, they did not have probable cause to make an arrest.
When someone preys on kids, it's tragic.
Last night, we learned the names of the 2 14-year-olds who were killed, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angelo. Also killed were 2 math teachers, Christina Aramy and Richard Aspinwall. 8 other students and 1 teacher were all taken to local hospitals with gunshot wounds, but they are expected to survive. Last week, the school swapped out the IDs for all of the faculty who are here at the school. Why does that matter? Well, these are a new kind of ID that actually has a panic button on it. When you press that panic button, you can put the whole school into a lockdown. It will send out your GPS coordinates down to exactly which part of the classroom you are in. It will send out alerts throughout the school, lock it all down, and have police come running. So nobody actually had to call the police. They already knew this was going on because students, actually the teachers, were able to press that panic button right there.
That is absolutely remarkable. I'm sure they thought and hoped that they would never have to use that panic button, much less use it so soon after receiving it. I know the day is just starting there, but I don't know if you've been able to talk to people, but what's it been like there on the ground?
It's really, really rough for a lot of parents, for a lot of alumni, for a lot of students. We talked to them yesterday here at the school and also at a candlelight vigil that was the most quiet candlelight vigil that I've ever been to, with hundreds and hundreds of people from rival schools, from people who went to school here in the district a long time ago, including the sheriff himself. He went to this district, and everybody was remembering these four people. We're talking about two 14-year-old students who were shot and killed here, and two math teachers here, and they are all remembered. There are also 9 other people who are in the hospital, all with gunshot wounds of some kind. None of the people who went to the hospital because of any other injury except for gunshot wounds, according to the sheriff that I talked to yesterday. But they are all expected to survive in this. But these emotional scars, you know, Anne-Marie, will last for a very, very long time.
Yeah, most definitely, Dave. Thank you very much.
Now, in this alleged incident that took place at Allahatchie High School in Georgia in the morning, 14-year-old Colt Gray went to his algebra class, and as he was sitting in his algebra class, he decided to leave the classroom without permission, and as he left the classroom without permission, he then somehow got an AR-style weapon from possibly his parents that he took without permission, and then came back into the school and tried to get back into his classroom. And as he tried to get back into his classroom, he found the door locked, and when he did not find access to the classroom he was attending, he then went to the classroom next door and participated in a mass shooting where he murdered 2 teachers and murdered 2 students. And after murdering these 2 teachers and 2 students in that classroom, Colt Gray then surrendered to authorities, and many of them are scratching their head to why he wound up participating in this mass shooting. However, I have to wonder why no one did anything about Colt Gray when the FBI clearly had him on their radar a year ago. Now, this entire incident is one that people are trying to say that is an isolated incident, but when I take a critical examination of Colt Gray's alleged actions, they definitely fit the pattern and profile for beta males that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it's clear to me that Colt Gray is a boy on the road to becoming a man in crisis, and he definitely was one that the FBI should have taken a lot more seriously, one that they should have really gone out here and doubled down on their investigation instead of dismissing his antisocial behavior that he was alleged to have participated in back when he was 13 years old before he attended Allahatchie High School. Now, according to reports, Colt Gray allegedly wound up putting up several threats on social media to participate in a shooting or a mass shooting, and had pictures of guns on his social media, and these pictures were so alarming that the FBI was called in and they did an investigation of Colt Gray. However, Colt Gray denied that this was going on, but if you have the FBI calling the home, then there clearly is something wrong, because as someone who understands how the internet works, I understand that if you have somebody out here and they're putting up pictures of guns and talking about a mass shooting on places like social media, it's easy to find that individual and find, one, their IP address of the computer that they're using, and 2, find the account of the individual who is posting this content. And basically, all of those indicators basically pointed a trail at Colt Gray, but the FBI really did not go out here and follow through on their investigation. And had they followed through on their investigation, maybe they could have prevented this shooting the same way that people back in Michigan a couple of years ago could have easily stopped Ethan Crumbley when he was out here participating in a mass shooting and was actually encouraged to do so by his own parents. Now, this whole situation with Colt Gray and Ethan Crumbley and Peyton Gendron are all part of a new disturbing trend I'm seeing with the man crisis. A disturbing trend where, one, I'm seeing that many of these individuals who are participating in these crimes are getting younger, and two, one, where I'm seeing where these males are out here participating in these crimes with an increasing frequency, and three, a trend where women and men who are parents are denying the problem, and denying the problem because they don't want to acknowledge that their child is somebody who has serious issues. Because if they have to acknowledge that this child has serious issues, it means that, one, they have to be accountable for that child, and two, they have to acknowledge that the way that they have been raising this child is leading to this child growing up to not be a healthy boy, growing up to become a healthy adult, but a man in crisis, and they don't want to acknowledge that. And since they don't want to acknowledge that because they feel like this is something personally bad about them, they don't want to admit that there's a problem, and it's that denial that is keep making things as related to the man crisis in this country becoming progressively worse, because clearly there is a serious problem that is getting progressively worse with the way we're raising boys to become men. And what's happening here is basically something I talked about for many years as related to the man crisis, about, one, us seeing an increase in frequency of this violence, two, this violence getting progressively worse, and three, many of the people out here denying the problem. And one of the reasons I believe they're possibly denying the problem is white supremacy, because many of these white individuals don't want to admit that the way they are parenting their children is not raising healthy adults, but maladjusted individuals. And these maladjusted individuals basically have an antisocial perspective of life, where they basically are looking to go out here and do harm to society and do harm to people. And that's what I see happening here with Colt Gray. I see a really, again, disturbing trend, because this boy is only 14 years old, and he's participating in the same type of antisocial behavior I have seen many serial killers wind up participating in. And this behavior, as I've seen with this trend with not only Colt Gray, but also with Ethan Crumbley, with Peyton Gendron, and all three of these boys who basically were teenagers, is all part of, again, a really disturbing trend. A disturbing trend where I'm seeing where these boys are basically out here and they're not really being parented and given guidance by adults, but they are put in front of devices, and as they get on these devices, they don't really learn those proper male life skills like critical thinking, conflict resolution, or problem solving. No, what I'm seeing with these males and the way they're behaving is that they sit there simmering and boiling in anger about whatever frustrations they have about life. And as they sit there simmering and boiling in anger about whatever frustrations they have in life, they turn to social media to participate in antisocial behaviors. And as they turn to social media to participate in antisocial behaviors by going on some of these forums like 4chan and Reddit and many other places, what they're doing is sitting there talking about doing harm to others. And as they sit there talking about doing harm to others, many parents are either oblivious, like in the case of Colt Gray and Peyton Gendron, or like Ethan Crumbley. What you have is even more disturbing, is parents that basically enable their child's dysfunctional and antisocial behavior, and I dare to say psychotic behavior, by encouraging them, by buying them weapons, and buying them weapons all the while knowing that the child willfully and intentionally wants to do harm to others, and never sits down and asks the critical question, why is my child sitting here talking about killing people, and why is my child sitting here talking about participating in a mass shooting? And the reason that they don't want to answer that question is because, again, they don't want to admit that they basically fucked up as parents and raised a fucked up child, excuse my language, and don't want to say that the way that they parented that child basically is a bad reflection on them, because again, when you have a child who is about, again, starting from the age of about 14 years old, and they're sitting there talking about killing people and getting a visit from the FBI, this is not something you trivialize or dismiss or sit there and say, oh, he's just saying things on the internet. I mean, if you got a visit from the FBI, that's something that needs to be taken seriously, because if you have a child who's, again, going on in the internet talking about killing people, that's something that really needs to be serious, especially after the FBI are showing up. But in the case of Colt Gray, the parents did not take it seriously. I mean, here's a boy who at 13 years old is sitting here talking about murdering people with malice aforethought, and the parents basically ignore this child, again, talking about something as serious as this, and the parents just sit there and blow it off, not understanding that when you have a child who's sitting there talking like this child is a ticking time bomb, and I dare to say was one of the landmines we have seen all across this country since the COVID-19 lockdowns, because the COVID-19 lockdowns basically exacerbated the situation as related to the hundreds of millions of men out here who are out here, because they have been ticking time bombs for many years. But when they got locked down, this accelerated these individuals, accelerated the clocks, because many of these individuals were sitting here basically in front of this internet in these echo chambers on places like 4chan and 8chan and Reddit and many of these other places. And as they were sitting in these internet echo chambers, they were sitting there thinking about doing harm to people, sitting there doing harm to people, because these individuals, again, they're not living in the real world. No, they are living in a rose-colored reality. And as they are living in this rose-colored reality, they are not really understanding about life in the real world or understanding how their actions have consequences. That's what's happening here in America as related to the boys in our society. These boys are not really being taught anything about accountability or responsibility. That's all part of male life skills and male survival skills. And sadly, these boys are not being taught what they need to survive in this world, because many of these boys, again, are having devices put in front of their faces. And as they are put in front of their faces, what's happening here is that these individuals are just basically going to the internet, and the internet, basically, they're going to the most antisocial parts of the internet, because they don't know how to go to real people to learn how to solve problems in real life. Because again, this was a 13-year-old boy, and this 13-year-old boy is being questioned by the FBI. Him and his father are being questioned by the FBI, and nobody sits there and says, hey, if this boy is on the internet and he's talking about killing people on the internet, that's a red flag. And if the FBI have to come out, that's a real serious issue. But what happened? They said, oh, the boy says, because he says he didn't do it. Oh, it's because he's white and he said so. But there was a trail right there. Again, I'm somebody who's on the internet all the time, and I know that if they could find this boy's IP address, and again, IP addresses are specifically assigned to the computer that a person is using, and if that computer is their cell phone, it's definitely telling you this person has a problem because you have a person putting this type of information on social media, and you have this person who's doing it on devices. But instead of following up on this situation, the FBI just basically ignored the situation. And as they ignored this situation, they basically allowed this boy to escalate his behavior from talking about a crime to actually participating in the murder of 2 of the teachers at his school and 2 of his classmates. That's all because, again, America refuses to acknowledge the seriousness of the man crisis in this country. America refuses to acknowledge how serious it is, the way we're raising boys to become not, well, healthy men, but maladjusted, dysfunctional males. And these maladjusted, dysfunctional males are looking to participate in these violent crimes like mass shootings at a younger age. And nobody's really taking it seriously because nobody in America, again, wants to acknowledge the man crisis. And they don't want to acknowledge the man crisis in this country because, again, it points a finger right back at the parents of these children and especially points a finger at the women here in America. And it says that the women here are doing a really bad job of raising kids. And really, it really goes beyond saying that the mothers are doing bad jobs. It says that the American culture is doing a bad job of raising children. And these children basically are a reflection of our post-COVID society, which has become more hostile and more antisocial, more hostile and antisocial, where you see people get, again, as young as 14 years old, believing that they have to participate in mass murder, because, again, they're not getting the proper male life skills and male survival skills because most of us are more focused on the internet than dealing with real people, or even worse, not focused on raising real children to become healthy men and women. No, what is happening is a direct response to all of this antisocial social media, a disturbing trend I'm also seeing as related to things that I've seen as related to the responses in my comment section to many of my videos. I'm seeing that also, and again, people don't want to acknowledge this whole situation, that America's becoming progressively worse, and this child-based behavior basically is a reflection of how much worse things are getting as related to this man crisis in this country. And what's sad is that many in the West don't want to acknowledge that the way we are parenting children is leading to maladjusted children like this because they keep dismissing it as isolated incidents. But this isolated incident is part of a disturbing trend when you start to connect it with previous mass shooters like Ethan Crumbley and Peyton Gendron, and you start to see the pattern that is forming as related to antisocial social media behavior, and you start to see the antisocial pattern of behavior that is forming with these young males who are all young white males who have, again, grown up in the age of social media. And Peyton Gendron, again, 19 years old, Ethan Crumbley, I think about 17 years old, and now you have Colt Gray, who is 14 years old. Again, all of them grew up in their adolescence with social media. All of them grew up thinking about doing harm to people because, again, they didn't know how to socialize with real people, and all of them were a clear, serious pattern that shows how many, again, in white America don't want to deal with the problem of their white male sons, and they don't want to deal with the problem of their white male sons because of their white privilege. They think, oh, there's no problem here, and they want to sit here and talk about the guns. No, it's not a gun issue. It's a family issue, and it's been a family issue for the last 60 years. It's been a family issue for the last 60 years because the way we changed the family when we had the rise of the feminist movement of the 1960s, where people in big business thought, oh, we don't really need the mother in the home. We can have the child in daycare. And as we have the child in daycare without a mother to teach them a foundation as related to social and interpersonal skills and a father there to provide structure for them, the child is in these daycares. And as they're in these daycares, they basically become antisocial individuals because they don't have a parental bond. And since they don't have a parental bond, they become detached individuals, detached from people and disconnected from people. And since they become detached and disconnected from people, what they do is, again, start to form antisocial frameworks for thinking. And that, again, is exacerbated by the internet and social media. But instead of trying to address all of these issues, what many in corporate American big business want to do is just say it's the guns. But the whole thing is how can it be the guns when you have a mindset that is forming, a mindset that has been forming before this child ever got access access to guns or even understood anything about guns. And that's the whole thing that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about the mindset that forms in places like daycare, where children aren't parented. Nobody wants to talk about how these children basically, again, become maladjusted because they're in daycare for a good chunk of their time, and then their parents don't really do any teaching when they get the kids home. And then since they don't do any teaching, what they learn is dysfunction from individuals who are toxic on social media. And then as they learn this dysfunction on social media, they learn about hatred and learn how to hate because they never were shown any love. They learn how to hate because they never learned anything about love. And as they learn how to sit there and simmer and boil in anger in a rose-colored reality that they live in because there are no real people to care for them, what happens is that these kids are getting younger and younger, seething in this anger, talking about doing harm to people because there is nobody to love them. And as they have nobody to love them, they explode in this rage. And they explode in this rage where they look to participate in these shootings. And they participate in these shootings because they have easy access to guns. Or in the case of Ethan Crumbley, they basically have parents who give them guns. And that's what leads to them participating in this type of violence. That's what leads to them participating in this kind of violence. And it basically is where you have a child of the corn basically participating in this violence. A child who was not nurtured, a child who basically grew up like a stalk, a child who grew up like a stalk and then basically ran wild. And again, instead of America acknowledging the foundations of the problem, you have politicians sitting there talking about gun control. No, this is not a gun control issue. No, I remember reading about the 1950s when we had an intact family before the feminist movement, where we had gun classes in high school, and we had the least amount of homicides in this country. And the reason why we had the least amount of homicides in this country is because we had a functioning American family, and kids could learn about things like guns and knives because there was a father and a mother in the home to teach them proper male life skills and male survival skills. And because those boys learned proper male life skills and male survival skills, they could have weapons inside of a classroom and never think about harming anyone because they learned how to think critically, they learned how to use logic and reason, they learned how to problem solve. Unfortunately, with this generation, this is not being taught in places like daycares, and these children aren't being nurtured in daycares because mom is too busy working, and because mom is too busy working and is not working on the development of this child, what's happening is that this child is learning antisocial behavior by being exposed to things online that before they even understand how the world works, and that's what's leading to all of this disturbing trend of these shooters getting younger and younger. And sadly, our country is so racist, it doesn't want to acknowledge that if you've got a 14-year-old participating in a plan to participate in a mass shooting, they just don't want to acknowledge it because they don't want to say, oh, this white male is participating in this kind of violence. Don't want to say that and acknowledge that there is a problem. And sadly, it's the FBI. Again, they can make a pattern and a profile for a terrorist. They can even make a pattern and a profile for a black man as related to life, but they won't make a pattern and a profile for a white male who participates in these kind of crimes because it seems like the majority of these shooters are white males. And again, the racist and white supremacist system doesn't want to acknowledge that there's a problem with the white males that they socially engineered under feminism, that these kinder, gentler, softer males are not growing up to become men, but they're growing up to become men in crisis who are looking to wage war on their own communities, wage war on their own people, and again, at a young age, looking to do harm to people. But again, America doesn't seem to want to acknowledge the problem we're having in this country. The problem we're having in this country is the way we have been parenting children, the way we have been trying to go out here and put money over people and put money over family. That's the problem we've been having in this country for the last 60 years. And since we don't want to acknowledge that there's a problem, we are reaping what we sowed, later than what we sowed, greater than what we sowed, from the wealthy's plans to go out here and again take the father out of the home as the leader, take the mother out of the home as the home manager, and have everybody working. But what are we working for if our children can't function? I mean, what are you working for if your children can't function? Because what's happened here with this child, again, shows that it's a problem of a family where we're not raising well-adjusted adults, but we're raising boys to become men in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about what leads to a child growing up on this road to dysfunction and how to identify the antisocial behaviors that beta males participate in so to prevent your child from winding up on this road to doing harm to others or themselves, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos about The Man Crisis, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.